Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Ben, and this is Fresh Red Kills. Okay, so welcome. I am recording today from my library. It definitely makes for a better background, better atmosphere overall. However, it's not without its drawbacks. I am next to a road, so you will hear some cars go by occasionally, and I don't know if you can hear that right now, but the wind has picked up quite a bit. A little bit noisy in this room, as I had said before, but I'm going to give it a shot. I did finish reading Knights of Bushido, okay, by Lord Russell Liverpool, A History of Japanese War Crimes During World War II, originally published in 1958. And, you know, I talked about this in the last Fresh Red Kills. It is what it says. I mean, it is a long laundry list of all the terrible things that the Japanese did during World War II. And just like I had said last time, it is not pleasant reading. It is, you know, the kind of thing that you feel like you need a bath afterwards. After that, I went ahead and read Narnia, which I finished this morning, and I'll talk about in just a second. But yeah, a few notable things from this that I didn't mention in the last update. In the modern, sorry, the forward here to the 2016 edition, one of the things that that writer, who is, let's see, Yuma Totani, a professor of history, wrote in 2015. One of the things that he says about this is that Russell does sort of neglect to implicate the emperor in the war crimes. The emperor gets off way too easy in Russell's account, when, you know, according to that modern historian, the emperor should have borne more of the blame. Another thing, you know, that is worth mentioning with this is that Russell really lays out how, he was a lawyer, so he lays everything out like it's a court case, like he's laying out evidence. And I'm sorry if I seem a little distracted. The wind's really picking up, so I'm watching trees out the window going back and forth. But he has a very lawyerly approach to all of this, where he's laying out not just evidence, but he often will point to eyewitness accounts afterwards from the survivors who gave the accounts of, you know, the horrible atrocities that he's recounting. And he makes it a point to really lay out the case that this was from the highest levels. You know, this was, you know, even if he didn't say the emperor, definitely Tojo. You know, it was basically understood throughout the Japanese military that atrocities, that torture, that killing was acceptable. It was expected. It was the way things would be done. And that was pretty well understood, it seems, throughout the entire Japanese army. There are some major omissions. You know, they don't talk about, he doesn't talk about at all about Unit 731, which had medical atrocities, horrible experiments that the Japanese conducted. And he probably doesn't mention it because a lot of those, the people who were guilty of those crimes, were given immunity, especially by the United States, so that we could benefit from the medical knowledge that came out of those experiments. So they got off really light, and there's really not even a mention in here. So this is definitely not a complete account, even if it is a major dark list of all the terrible things that the Japanese did. The other thing that I can mention with this is that, you know, you really get the impression of how deeply racism and prejudice played a part in World War II. I mean, that's obvious when we look at the Nazis, but it is just as clear when we talk about the Japanese. You know, their own ideas of racial superiority, in the way that they treated the Chinese, in the way that they humiliated Westerners, in order to show Koreans, you know, they were occupying Korea, to show Koreans how much they can dominate the Westerners and put their white captives through horrible humiliations. So, you know, through and through, that war was about racism. And of course, the U.S. is not innocent in that respect as well. Yeah, considering that our army was segregated. Just a touch of that. So anyway, If people are interested in this part of history, I'd certainly recommend this. But like I said, it's not feel-good reading. So after this, I did go on to part of my middle grade March TBR, and that's Chronicles of Narnia, The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. The first, at least it was written to be the prequel. It was written to be the first in the series. It's really, it was, I think, the second to last that was actually written. So it's not first as far as publication, but it is first in intention. And I know that there is a debate among C.S. Lewis lovers about the order that it really should be read in. But this is the copy that I had laying around. I figured, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. I had read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe back in like 5th grade. And as I read this, I started having, more recollection about that time period. The thing that really stood out to me when I was younger, when I first read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, was that lamppost out in the woods, lit and on. That's really what intrigued me. Aslan never intrigued me. Frankly, I always kind of found him to be kind of a boring character. I know it's going to be sacrilege to some people, but I just didn't find him terribly interesting, even when I was a kid. And I didn't understand the religious allegories that were occurring in there. I didn't understand the whole thing with Aslan and the stone slab breaking. I didn't really understand why that had to happen. And again, it's been a long time since I read that book. But I wonder if it was a similar thing when I'm reading this, where sometimes, I don't have anything against Christian allegory being inside the books, but sometimes I feel like the allegory gets in the way of the story, and it doesn't always make sense. So this is supposed to lay out the origin of Narnia. This is how it all began, how the witch got to Narnia. A little background, the wardrobe of that lamppost. So we follow this kid, Diggory, and his friend Polly, and there are some really cool elements to this book. I like there's a kind of a multiverse where they go into different dimensions, different universes, which I really like. And that for me was the strongest part of the book, when they go into this ruin of a world called Chan, and that's where they meet the woman who we will eventually know is the witch. And that world is just like an empty, desolate ruin, but it's like one endless palace. They go room after room, courtyard after courtyard. It reminded me of when I visited the Palace of Versailles, and you just go from room after room after room, and it's endless. And you could get lost in those buildings. I mean, they're bigger than some towns. These palaces, they're just massive. I remember walking through there and just realizing my neck was hurting because I spent the entire time looking up at the ceilings of the painted ceilings, and that's not usually the way you're used to going through a room. So I love the idea of this empty, sprawling palace that's falling apart. And that's it seems to be the entire world. And then they get to this room where all these monarchs are just still like statues, or like waxworks almost, sitting in their chairs with their frozen expressions. That I thought was terrific. And there was also a pretty humorous part where one of the other villains of the story, Uncle Andrew, this boy's uncle, who kind of gets this whole mess started, there's a whole section where he's basically humiliated, and there are a bunch of animals who have newly been created. They can newly talk, and they're not sure what kind of animal he is, and they kind of put him through these embarrassing trials to try and figure out what he is, and I really enjoyed that. Like I say, once Aslan enters, that's when I kind of start losing interest, and the whole premise ends up kind of getting lost on me a little bit, because there's just, I guess, a minor spoiler. Diggory and Polly, they end up bringing the witch into one of these multiverse dimensions, and they get there and it's just completely empty. Then they start hearing this singing, and it's Aslan who is going, and as he sings, Narnia is being created, and is being created around them. And the witch even ends up trying to hit Aslan, and something just bounces off of him and doesn't even notice her, and then she freaks out and runs. But then he's chastising Diggory for bringing evil into his world. There's a line in here where he's like, my world is only hours old, and you've already brought evil into it. And the only thing I could think was, you created the world around that evil. The witch was there before the world. You know, the evil actually predated your world. So he keeps laying blame on this kid who, at the time, was just trying to escape, was just trying to survive. And there you can kind of go through the whole Christian illusions. There's kind of a not so subtle recounting of Genesis and the temptation of the apple and the serpent, and that's all in there. But Aslan is supposed to be somebody that we're supposed to be awed by, and love, and look at him with this admiration. But he just kind of comes off as a jerk sometimes. So I don't know. I might continue. I might reread the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe at some point. But I thought this was okay. The first half I was really enjoying. Once it got into Narnia, I actually started finding my attention slipping. But anyway, decent as a children's book. And other than that, I'm about halfway through Matilda with my son. Roald Dahl. I try to read him a chapter a night, but he's also reading me a book. So we take turns reading chapters, and that's been nice. Haven't watched a lot, but it's been a very busy week. And I am hoping today, on this Sunday, to get a bunch of videos recorded, some tags and everything else. Before I go, I'd like to give a shout out to Michael Vaughan over at what he refers to as Stately Vaughan Manor. I'll leave a link for his channel down below. He does a terrific job going through genre fiction, especially horror, fantasy, sci-fi, the classics, some obscure things from the 19th century they don't see many people talk about, and he does a great job discussing them. I highly recommend checking out his channel. I've really enjoyed his videos. So I'm going to leave a link for that down below. And all right, till next time.